think in this whole clean tech world, we should focus much more on the benefits and not on maybe little things that you're missing. We really supported the founders spot on, and I think we developed a reputation for being absolutely honest. We believe, looking at the cost curve of renewable energies, everything will be powered by renewable energies.
Hey everyone, quick note for you. You're currently listening to the free preview of this episode. If you'd like the full thing, the full shebang, go over to our Substack. That's cleantechies.substack.com/subscribe and become a paid subscriber. Any paid subscription gets you full access to the show on the Clean Techies Substack.
Enthusiasm and optimism is especially relevant in this climate tech funding environment. And that's why we were so excited to talk to Felix Krause from Vireo Ventures. Now, Felix has so much information and knowledge on the state of electrification, Europe's role in the global climate tech community, and has a number of portfolio successes that he is able to speak to about things that he noticed. Now, speaking to him right now is incredibly useful because of how much conversation is happening around the relationship between green energy and energy demand globally. This was a fantastic episode, and I think very useful for founders and investors alike who are trying to best understand how we navigate the times ahead. As always, thanks so much for listening. Shout out to Goodwin for sponsoring this episode, and enjoy. All right, Felix, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you for having me.
we were talking just about the edits we're going to make. So starting off strong.
Indeed, we are. No, but doing good. It's fantastic to be on the show. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Perfect. Where in the world are you today?
Based in Berlin, Germany. Sunny day, actually.
Yeah.
And living here for the past 16 years.
I think you are definitely not the first person from the sort of the Germany climate scene, and I think that's for good reason. A lot of smart folks out there. So
I hope I'm not going to be the last.
Yeah, and hopefully not the last. Yeah. We'll have to get one of your portfolio companies on then.
Yeah, I will do my very best. Yes.
Amazing. We start off with a bit of a fun question. So I'd love to kick it off by asking you if you could have dinner with any climate tech OG, clean tech OGs, and this is basically, anyone who you believe influenced the field, who would it be and why?
Well, some people took interesting turns, but I actually used to admire Elon Musk.
Okay.
I would still love to meet him to get an understanding how and why his views on this world have changed so radically.
Mm-hmm.
But I really liked the initial spirit of Elon Musk in pushing Tesla forward,
mm-hmm.
and really making it happen besides all odds. And what I really liked is that his mission was to electrify mobility, but he never sold it as electrification of mobility, but rather he sold the sportiness, the acceleration, the interconnection of the car. So, and I when I'm speaking to founders, I find a lot of people focus more on the individual features, but instead of the overall benefit. And I think in this whole clean tech world, we should focus much more on the benefits and not on maybe little things that you're missing. So yes, I would really love to meet and speak to Elon. And I think a second person is Richard Branson. I think Richard Branson is super cool person, has an amazing entrepreneurial journey. Also maybe taken 2 or 3 interesting turns in his lives.
Yeah.
But yet, no, indeed, I would love to also get feedback on him, how he scaled his businesses through storytelling, through just being on the top of the curve and really thinking so much more in advanced.
Yeah. I think you'd have provocative conversations with both of them, which is always good for dinner conversation.
I actually prefer, if everyone is in the same bubble, you're missing out on the fun part.
Yeah. I think you point out something that we'll get into later, but I do think that a recurring theme on this is some of the best operators and most successful operators focused on the value outside of the double bottom line, right? Which is, what is the opportunity that we can just do things better, and how can
Yes.
that be enabled in sort of like, new generation climate technology? So I think you're hitting the nail on the head there. We're kind of skipping many miles ahead. So I'd love to establish.
If any of those
Yeah.
two are listening, please, I
That would be a dream come true. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Amazing. So in that vein, would love to get started with, please tell me about your background. Who are you?
So I'm Felix, 46 years old, three small kids living in Berlin. I studied in the Netherlands and Spain, then did some corporate work. We spoke about that
Yeah.
previously, and decided that corporate work is great, but is not suitable for me. I then started and founded my first company in 2009, developing solar projects in Germany and the UK, and later founding a marketplace for trading existing PV assets called Milk the Sun, before I joined the newly established corporate venture capital fund from Energy, one of the back then largest utilities in Europe. Helped to build this, also met the rest of the Vireo team there. And then in 2021, started investing on our own account, and then end of 22 launched the fund.
Amazing. And so how did you get into climate? What was sort of your way into this space?
That's a very interesting question. I wish it was only to make the world a better place, but I actually, when my ex-colleague at the corporate we were working at and I started to look around what we would like to do outside of the corporate world, we looked at various opportunities. And back in 2000, end of 2008, 2009, the first solar wave was really hitting off. And we discovered that as an opportunity. But besides also having other opportunities, we then decided we want to make money. But at the same time, if we have the opportunity to do good while we make money, we go the path of doing good and making money. And that's how we wandered into it.
Quickly on that, what made you feel like that was an opportunity where you could make money?
Yes, exactly. It was money was the driver. And then it was, if we can make money on this, but at the same time do good, this is a perfect combination. This is what actually kept me in the climate tech scene ever since.
Wow. I love that. And make sure we're covering all bases. So now speeding forward to, thinking through launching your own fund, Vireo Ventures, I think there's a bit of a transition there. So maybe if we can talk quickly about you as a person, why go out and start your own fund? Obviously, I'm sure at that time you're looking at a bunch of options. So can you talk me through that?
Yes. In 2020, Energy was taken over by its bigger rival, E.ON. And the team leading the fund, the corporate venture fund, and myself decided against remaining with the big corporate, but instead do something else. Initially, we wandered off in different directions, but always wanted to keep investing together. So as a group, we invested in 19 companies from our private money. And actually, those investments developed much better than we had ever expected, but at the same time also required a lot more time. And similarly, we were approached by various people out of our network that they would like to invest alongside of us because it seemed that we were doing a good job.
Yeah.
So then we decided that this is a real business and market opportunity to launch our own early stage venture capital fund.
Amazing. And that was, when you say people started to notice, was it through, some of the success of the portfolio companies? Was it through, specific things you had done? Like, how did you garner that attention?
You know that feeling when you meet someone who shares your vision for the future? It just clicks, like two peas in a pod. Well, that's exactly how we felt when we met Goodwin, who we are proud to have as our sponsor. Being the first major law firm to set up a climate-specific startup and venture practice makes them exactly the kind of partner we are excited to work with. They realize that there are a plethora of challenges to building climate tech startups,
And that's why they have built an entire suite of resources for founders, investors, and entrepreneurs in the space. They even offer several tailored pricing methods. And guess what? It doesn't matter where you are listening to this. Goodwin is a global law firm that you can trust to be your partner through it all. From incorporation to exit, they've got you covered.
Go to goodwinlaw.com and tell them Clean Techie sent you to get exclusive access to startup resources. All right, back to the show.
I think two reasons. A, we had access to super early stage deal flow that others were missing. So our team has been in the energy industry, all of us, for well over 10 years, the majority now for 20 years. So we really know a lot of the incumbents, we know of the players, but we also have access to experts who always shared with us how they believe the market is developing. So we utilize that to find really early stage companies. And then second, we were never, even though we wrote small tickets, we were never a passive investor. So we really supported the founders spot on. And I think we developed a reputation for being absolutely honest. So to also be transparent with the founders. So we prefer to name the white elephant as soon as possible, to also boldly tell them that this path they might be taking, they can take. I mean, they're the founders, we invested in them, but we highly, highly doubt that this will be successful. And at the same time, always being available. So if the founder has a doubt, if there's something not going well in the team, if the person is going through a personal crisis, because founding a company is not an easy journey. It's an uphill battle. It's very emotional. You have victories and losses at the same time. So being there for the founders, and I think that reputation spread. And this is the kind of interaction we also keep with our portfolio companies as of today. We might be diluted to a very small percentage, but a lot of them still call us when there's something going wrong or when they have doubt. And
when they
that's
want
a
that
position
honest
we
opinion.
love to have. Yes. So
And
all of us can just be reached via WhatsApp.
I love
and we
that.
answer.
I think that's a big thing, right? It's not to underestimate. I think anyone can hand out their WhatsApp number. It takes a lot to respond and respond frequently.
Hey founders, if you're hiring, I've got a special offer for you. For those of you who do not know, to pay the bills, I run a search firm called Earth Tech Talent. That's Earth with no A. We specialize in placing top sales and engineering talent at early stage clean tech startups in the United States. And we do it for way, way less than traditional search firms. I've actually been working as a recruiter for over 5 years in clean tech and have made over 70 placements, from the CTO of IPA Power, a Blackstone-backed energy developer, to most of the founding team at ChargeScape, a managed charging software joint venture between Honda, Ford, BMW, and Nissan. Early stage clean tech startups can't afford to not have the right talent, but they also cannot afford to use a traditional search firm for their recruiting needs. That's where we can help. We charge as low as 12% of first-year base salary, and this is compared to the typical 20 to 30% that most firms charge. So you can get an expert in the space at a price that does not break the bank. If you'd like to learn more, check out our website, earthtechtalent.com. That's, again, Earth with no A. And we really value transparency, so our pricing is publicly available on the website. If you're looking for support, book a call today. My calendar link is in the description, and be sure to reference this ad for $1,000 off of your first search. All right, back to the show.
Exactly. And if I know that you are under severe pressure and you need a decision now, I will try to put my kids aside and at least quickly respond, make out a time when we'll speak in the evening once the kids are in bed, but you will get a response.
I love that. So you touched, and I think you teased us a little bit on the hard conversations, right? Being honest. I'm wondering if, as you look back on your career, there's a story or two that you might be able to share with us about a time where you had to be honest, kind of how that experience went.
I think it goes back to one of my first employers, and I was hired there as a junior product manager, and the person I was reporting to got pregnant, and the pregnancy didn't go well. So I started, and the person had to leave, was on sick leave basically a
Okay.
week after I started. And then my back then CEO told me, Felix, you're in responsibility now. The company is going through a huge transition phase. I need you to do your absolute best. You need to, don't you worry. You're my man. I will cover you whatever happens if you make a mistake. If you make the same mistake twice, I will fire you because that's stupid.
Yeah.
And I made a huge mistake once,
Okay.
and he got my back. He
Oh, wow.
really stood up before everyone else and said, well, this has happened. Overall, we've all achieved all these things. And yes, we have a fuck up here, but it's all good. I'll
No.
cover for that. And of course, I only gained that trust because I was always transparent. Like, I never tried to hide little fuck ups that I produce, because I think things happen. Not all things go well.
Yeah.
And I tried to keep that mentality in mind when hiring people, but also when speaking to the portfolio companies. Like, we will stand up for you as long as we always know what's happening. We will always defend you.
Yeah. And is there a time where you felt as though you could see that was genuinely valuable? Because I think part of being an investor is you're trying to figure out, you think everyone else is thinking one way, right?
Yes.
And I think these interactions are so unique to the founder, unique to the investor, and so you can assume, of course, an investor will be honest with the founder, and then you find out one day that they, just said something in passing just to maybe, kind of like fill the void, right? And so I'm wondering if there's ever been a time that you've been surprised by what you found and really found that you were differentiated. Because I think not only is it valuable to do what you're doing, but it's also valuable to be one of the only people who can stick to it. And so I'm wondering if you've ever seen the other side.
Indeed, there was a time when at my previous employer, we could not do a follow-on round due to internal reasons. And I told the founder immediately when I found out. And I have not seen similar behavior from other CVCs in the past when they knew most likely they can't, because whatever, it's not their fault, but they try to disguise it. It doesn't happen too often, but I've seen that. I understand the reasoning, but nevertheless, ultimately it's not good. I really believe in transparency.
Yeah, totally. So I feel
we do exactly the same with our LPs. So our investors, if things are not working with a portfolio company or someone is struggling, we will let them know. We are kind of open books here.
Yeah, I think that's cool. I mean, I think that it's almost, there's not all founders who, I think the part of the conversation that people don't really talk about is also what a lot of the great founders and how they dictate their relationship with their investors, right? And I think the investor themselves also has to, like you said, it's the founder, it's their company. You're a support mechanism.
Yes.
In some situations, you are a more important support mechanism than others. But at the end of the day, you're navigating a dynamic where, in my experience, sometimes founders want to hear the truth and sometimes they don't, right? Because a part of also being a founder is, how do you believe you're going to change the world? And sometimes that means saying no to everyone, including your investor, right? So,
Climate tech founders are taking on a huge challenge. Not only do they need to know how to build a startup, but they also need to deal with hardware, have a strong handle on climate policy, know how to fundraise from diverse investor types. It's a lot.
That's why we made Clean Techies, the #1 podcast for climate tech entrepreneurs. In addition to our jobs, we devote 20 hours a week to producing this podcast for you. This way you can learn from the people who have walked the path before you, learn from their mistakes, and gain insights on navigating this complex journey. If this mission resonates with you, we are asking for your help. It takes a lot of effort and it's not free.
If you are already a subscriber and want to help, start supporting us today by going to Substack and clicking Upgrade to Paid. Thanks for helping all the climate tech entrepreneurs like you.
Actually, we tell our founders, at least I tell them, immediately, do not expect any diplomacy from me. You can do reference calls also with other portfolio companies, all fine, but do not expect diplomacy. But ultimately, it's you who calls the shots. Even though I might have a different opinion, we invested into you or the team. So you call the shots. And even if I have disagreed on that decision, Once that decision is taken, I will have your back on that. If someone like speaks negatively about that decision, I will be there and say, like, we took that decision all together, and well, things might have not worked out, but we took that decision. So it's what I regard internally. We will disagree, but on the external or outside facing side, we will not show disagreement.
Yeah. And that's more of a team player mentality, which I think is definitely valuable.
Yeah, it stays in the locker room, doesn't it?
Exactly. I feel like we sped ahead. And so what I would love to do is just do the no, this is on me, because I think the way you talk about the interpersonal parts of working with founders and the value there, like I think only the people who can do it really champion it. So I think that was gold, and we're going to keep going down it. But just to circle back for a quick second. So as you were thinking about doing this on your own, and you had that moment of like, hey, I think we can kind of do this.
On my own, like we had a team of 5 partners, so just not to neglect the others.
Of course. So as your team came up on the decision, what did you eventually decide on as the thesis? And I think we can talk also through how that thesis might have evolved over time.
Yeah, certainly. So just looking at the costs of electrons produced, we derived at the hypothesis of the all electrified world, meaning that ultimately everything will be either indirectly or directly powered by renewable energies or by electricity. And we believe, looking at the cost curve of renewable energies, everything will be powered by renewable energies. Now, the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine. We need intelligence. And we believe that the production of renewable energy, that's incremental changes, and a lot is happening there, but this is not a venture capital game. Mm-hmm. But the software actually managing the flows of electricity using as much data as possible to get the whole system, so production and consumption and transportation right, that's venture capital. That is a huge game. This is also where a lot what we see nowadays, 10 years ago, without AI would have not been possible. Mm-hmm. So we really saw this opportunity that AI is evolving, computing power is evolving, the access to data is getting easier, and at the same time, the costs of renewable energy assets are decreasing, that this is the right time.
And those cost curves are super central to what I think I'm hearing. So that was a first order effect. What did you believe? You talked about intelligence for a second, right? Yes. So as you looked through the sort of like maybe second order effects of all of this energy and technology out there, what do you believe is possible? Because we're not there right now, right?
No.
Obviously. And so what do you think has to change, broad strokes, to get from where we are now to that future?
That's an excellent question. I don't think I can answer that to its fullest, but we need to have real access to energy consumption data. That means we need to have a full smart meter rollout, and this energy data needs to be available. On the other side, we need more transparency on what is produced, how and when, because right now we are working with a lot of assumptions, but we don't have the real data. So that is on the data level that we need. And then in Europe, we also have quite strong data protection mechanisms. I understand where they're coming from, but I think in certain aspects, these should be relaxed, or rather be an opt-out than an opt-in to share that data, because no one cares about you personally. But unless I know what's happening on the street where you're living, I do have a problem allowing for this all electrified world, especially when everyone has having a heat pump, electric car, and so forth. Yeah. So we need more data. Then, and we all rely on one single grid. And this is where states or big companies need to come in. We need the grid to be more resilient. Mm-hmm. And then we're living in a dramatically changing world. And the grid, but also the production assets and the off-taking assets need to be cyber secured, because right now, at least, it can be extremely easy to get hold of these assets and either simply ask for a ransom,
Yeah.
cause blackouts, or actual meltdowns of batteries, which will cause quite big explosions. So there are various pillars that need to be resolved, but also at the same time possess huge investment opportunities.
Yeah, I think we were looking at a company that was securing operational technology. So you think about, the infrastructure of utilities, and those
Yes,
things are, you wouldn't consider them, traditional software related infrastructure, but there are digital signals and systems that are connecting all of that technology, and that therefore is
indeed.
vulnerable to a cyber attack. So I've
Yes.
looked in this space. That's a very important space that I think a few folks will solve, but I think people haven't really cracked what is the best go to market. And I think utilities are also not fully, it depends where you are. I don't think every utility is ready to commit to that yet.
So I wish I could disagree,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, yes, I fully resonate. Yes.
So talk me through the mechanics of your thesis, right? Whether you do early or late stage and how you think about your investing style.
So we love to be the first or amongst the first institutional investors on a cap table. We typically invest pre-seed seed with tickets between €500,000 to €1 million in an initial check, and then reserve up to €1 million for follow-on investments. We invest in Europe only, continent Europe,
Okay.
because as I was describing earlier, we want to build this strong relationship with the founders, with the team, the management team. And I doubt that you can do that if you're living in various time zones. If you
Yeah.
cannot also meet the founder in a personal meeting, if shit hits the fan, like within 24 hours. And so therefore we focus on Europe, early stage software, because as I said, a lot of the hardware is built, the hardware is ready. Now we are seeing, of course, changes in efficiency and so forth, but the hardware for this transition is built. We need the software, although, last point, we are investing in companies that use like a box
Yeah.
to extract data. But the business model needs to always be centered around recurring business models from software.
Yeah. Yeah. I was already going to ask you about sort of the latest and best in electrification. I think especially from the software angle. And so maybe we can start with this box. What do you mean by that? So what is the technology there?
We're seeing that quite often. You assume the granularity of the data would be there and you could just plug something in and extract it.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the granularity that you need to run kind of deep in the machine room operations isn't there. So a lot of our companies do have like a box that extracts and sends data. For example, we have one company called Green Fusion. They digitize the cellars or the heating of multifamily homes.
Okay.
And most of them are still powered by gas boilers.
Okay.
And those gas boilers, believe it or not, I couldn't believe it when they first told us, they are left in standard setting all their life. So they do have some maintenance, but they never adjust it. And Green Fusion has built a box. They learn how that specific multifamily house is using heating and then adapts the boiler. Sounds super simple, but it actually involves a lot of brain capacity on also AI, but it needs that box because that data would not be available.
And is there a services component to this business? I think I'm sensing that there might be.
The business itself is fully centered around optimizing, and you pay a recurring monthly fee for using the technology.
Okay.
But the box actually comes with its own little business model. But that's for us. That's just an add-on. That's a nice to have that you're renting this box. But it's a nice business.
Yeah.
But more important is the recurring, the learning, the savings you can have. The whole business would not make sense or wouldn't be possible unless you had that box that extracts the data. And we're seeing that quite often, that companies are building like a box to extract that data. That box itself, like installing that box, is revenue generating and maybe even cash flow positive, but this is not what we invest as a standalone business.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, I think when I was looking a lot in climate, especially from the investing angle, you obviously see the installation fees, right? And that floats a decent amount of revenue. But, I think, and this is a bit sort of a crude way to explain it, but it almost doesn't matter all the time how much the installation fee is, because one, if it's too high, it prevents people from actually installing product. And
yes,
if it's, I don't think there's ever a situation where too low matters, but sometimes you can lose money on the installation. But rather, if you look at the value accrued by the recurring revenue, that's usually always going to outstrip what is the installation fee. And you kind of want to bank on the recurring revenue.
Fully agree. Actually, I prefer if the box does have a value, because then customers appreciate it.
Okay.
And as most of our businesses work in the B2B, feel customers are used to also paying for something, and then they see a value also to this white or gray box that is hanging there, that they paid something
for. Yeah, very
exactly, and it makes it easier. But our investment decision is always centered around the capabilities of the software, the stickiness of the software, and how the software is then also sold.
Yeah. And so actually talk to me through that. So what do you mean by how the software is sold?
Well, we've seen in the past that great products don't always make it to the market. And we've seen a lot of founders that have built great products that have never left the stage of selling features instead of selling solutions and understanding what the problems of potential customers are. So when we are evaluating teams, we want to see that deep technical expertise and like really understanding what's happening in the machine world, how they can change things. But at the same time, we would like to see someone who can explain what the product is doing in very simple words that I, as a non-technician, can understand, that customers, decision makers that most likely are not trained engineers can understand. And that's something we want to see a quite diverse team in that respect.
Okay. Is that something you index more on your interactions or experience? And I think that's a trade-off all investors have to make, which is, what are you looking at in terms of the history of the person and what's on paper versus what you're feeling as you talk to them? How much, I think, because what you're talking about is almost an intangible, how much in this process do you rely one way or the other?
You caught me off guard. Yes, it is. It is. I always wish we were only taking objective decisions, but of course this is highly subjective. This is gut feeling. How we try our best to standardize that evaluation process.
Right.
Our LP base consists of a little over than 70 individuals and firms that are all active in one way or another in the energy world. Plus, we have a network of a lot of incumbents, utilities, and so forth. So what we try, as soon as we find something interesting, is ask them for sales documents, and then we make introductions. We make introductions to basically anyone whom we know. We potentially bring them, even if we don't invest, we at least offer an opportunity for business.
Yeah.
So it's not lost time, no reference cost, something, but it's more like you learn, you get to know customers. And afterwards, we are speaking to those people that we made introductions to and try to understand how was the interaction? Like how did they follow up? Did they communicate properly? Like we get a sense if they really got across what they're doing, even though it's a highly complex product, or if the potential decision maker buyer of this product doesn't actually have a clue what you're doing. Yeah. And this has proven, to us at least, extremely helpful.
Yeah. And, I think one of the forward-looking trends is AI, and I think the optimization problem, right? Which is, I think one of the most interesting part, when I was in climate tech especially, is watching the evolution back to a services-based model. And I think there's this underlying correlation between the fact that a lot of climate tech energy utilities and resources are geographically bound and also require geographic distribution, which requires an assessment model that deals with a lot of spatial data. Now, Of course, software is best productized from like a venture perspective so that you can reduce the cost per, the CAC, the CAC, how much it costs to sell the actual product. But in theory, I think a couple of companies on sort of the more practical AI side, which is where I look, are flipping that business model on its head, right? Now that we can sort of leverage large amounts of compute to have very sophisticated interactions, services are back into sort of like, wait a minute, can you run a scalable service-oriented product? And I'm wondering, this is just sort of an example of some of the way in which the dynamics are flipping. I'd love to kind of turn it over to you to understand, where do you believe AI in general? And I think AI is a reductive term. I think what we could better summarize it as largely available compute and more sophisticated either language techniques or reinforcement learning is enabling better electrification. Like, where do you see that happening?
The huge amount of data that are available, but that are not connected. There are so many data sources available. They're not being used. They're not all plugged together because it's speaking a different standard. Europe relied on defense, on like having a say in the world, fighting for our values, whatever, extremely on the United States. If you control your vertical and you work within your vertical, you're doing good. And I believe the energy tech transition is not led by...
Thanks for listening so far. To get the full episode, go over to Substack and become a Clean Techies premium member by selecting any paid membership. Not only will you get access to hear the rest of this episode, but you'll get access to exclusive interviews, our monthly show, the best, most relevant insights from our shows, and access to our premium community.